Guys, the NBA has decided they're going to be returning and continuing the playoffs. We don't have exactly when that's going to be happening, but we're going to do a show today anyway. Just going to be answering questions, looking at the state of the NBA playoffs. Michael Bolton, he's ready.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Yesterday's show, of course, we had the NBA games postponed, strike, and then the NBA postponing those games. We're having no games again today. We may not have games on Friday, but the NBA playoffs will be resuming. It might be on Friday, it might be on Saturday, but those games will occur. And of course, then we'll have DFS stuff, and all the DFS projections will, as always, be updated over on Basketball Monster. But today's show, I thought it was an opportunity to go live. I'm going live here on Periscope. So if there are people watching this one live and you want to throw any sort of questions in, whatever it is, about the NBA, about fantasy, about dynasty, about general life, about whatever it is you want to talk about, we can talk about that. But also just a little bit of an update of where things sit in the playoffs, about how players are playing, what that might mean for next season, a whole bunch of stuff that I'm going to try and get to in today's show. So let's start by just recapping, I guess, the state of play in the NBA and where we sit with these playoffs at the moment. Again, if you do have any questions, chuck them in, and we'll get them answered. So let's start over in the Eastern Conference, where 3 of the 4 series are done. The only one, amazingly, that is still going is the number 1 seed Milwaukee Bucks and the Orlando Magic. The Bucks are 3-1 up in that series after losing Game 1, and Aaron Gordon now has left the Orlando bubble. So he's gone home, 10 miles and driven home because of that hamstring issue. He hasn't played at all in this series. We know Jonathan Isaac's out. Orlando's not going to get past Game 5 here, I wouldn't have thought. But Gordon and this hamstring injury, that's going to make it even harder. It's not going to be something that impacts him next season, I would guess, but it's a disappointing end to his time in the bubble and a disappointing end to his 19-20 season, because I'd say he was not at the level that he would have hoped to have been at. So Milwaukee should get through that one pretty easily. And then they get to take on the Miami Heat, who easily dispatched the Indiana Pacers. I had Miami winning that series, but in 6 games, they proved me wrong there. They won that in 4. Yes, Indiana didn't have Domantas Sabonis. They also had Victor Oladipo, who is not the same. And quite frankly, I don't think he's ever going to be the same again. We know he had that 17-18 season, which was amazing. He was not that level before he got injured. Then he had knee problems and quad injuries, and we talked about his quad injury, saying we've never seen anyone come back from this injury at a high level in the NBA because it's never happened before. So I was extremely worried. And it's been exactly that way. He is not their best player anymore. And he is playing like he should be. And that is a concern for the Pacers, who have just fired their head coach, Nate McMillan. So they are in a real interesting spot. What do they do with Sabonis and Miles Turner? Jeremy Lamb's going to miss, I'd say, a big chunk of next season as well. TJ Warren obviously had moments in the bubble, but I think we look at those big games that Warren had and then forget that he was shit in a whole bunch of them as well. So he's not the savior guy that they need. So there are some real concerns there. But on to Miami and Milwaukee. I think it's going to be a really interesting series. And this is assuming that Milwaukee can get past Orlando. I don't really see why they wouldn't be able to, but that's assuming that they do. They are able to get past the Magic there. I think the Bucks get that series, but it is a tough one. And I could see that going minimum 6, and I think it might actually go 7. The Bucks haven't been at their best in the bubble. They've crushed Orlando in the last 3 games. There's no doubt about that. But Miami, with Goran Dragic playing close to career best basketball, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, the shooting of Duncan Robinson, which is something that has worried the Bucks, really good 3-point shooters. Tyler Hero has taken his game up 50-70% at least from where he was in the regular season before the bubble. So this Heat team is doing the right thing. And we talk about Eric Spoelstra. Yeah, we've talked about Mike Budenholzer being someone inflexible in rotations. Spoelstra is the opposite of that. Yeah, Myers Leonard, you're not going to do anything here, so piss off. Kendrick Nunn, you're not for us. I'd go away. We're just going to use our good players here, ramping up Andre Iguodala, giving 30 minutes a night to Tyler Hero. You're getting Bam Adebayo to play center, which is his best position. Frank Vogel, you probably want to take some hints on that. So it's going to be an interesting series. I think in the end I pick Bucks in 7. The next Eastern Conference series is way more interesting. We're going to do full postmortems on the Sixers, who are without a coach, and on Brooklyn, who are sort of without a coach later on in the offseason. But we've got Toronto, we've got Boston. Kyle Lowry is dealing with an ankle injury. Maybe this 2 or 3 day break helps Lowry get ready for game 1. And of course, Boston's going to be without Gordon Hayward. Toronto all season has been the second best team in the East. Boston's been the third best team. It's been that way most of the year. Losing Hayward is a big blow for Boston. I'm a little bit, I don't know if worried is the right word here as to how this is going to pan out for Toronto. I look at what Jason Tatum's doing. Jaylen Brown's been fantastic. Kemba Walker is playing at a decent enough level. But the Van Vliet, Lowry, Siakam, who hasn't got going at all, Anunoby, Gasol, Ibaka, it's a really, really good series. I think I would end up picking Toronto in 7 in this one. I think it goes minimum 6 games either way. I think that the Gasol-Ibaka pairing could be a little bit of problem for Kanter, Tice, and Williams. And we know that Kanter got minutes against the Sixers because he matches up okay against Embiid. I'm not sure that's necessarily going to be the case against Gasol. That could be a problem there. And maybe they have to go to the Rock DJ Robbie Williams. But it is absolutely a series that I am super pumped to watch. Toronto and Boston whenever it is back in action. So guys, Western Conference. All of these series are pretty much still running at this point. We have got the Lakers and the Blazers. That one's almost done. Damien Lillard, and I talked about this the other day. I'm worried about his knee injury because they gave us, it's a knee sprain. That means absolutely jack shit. It could be a grade 1 meniscus issue that's whatever it is. It could be nothing, right? It could be a week's injury. It could be an ACL tear because that is what knee sprains are often referred to as. Jabari Parker, Zach LaVine, that's been the case in the past. And now Lillard has left the bubble because MRI results are confusing or not clear. He's not coming back. This is a massive concern. I am not saying he tore an ACL or a PCL or an MCL or any of those things. I'm not saying he did that. I'm also not saying that because there's a massive chance that there is some significant damage here in Lillard's knee and the Blazers are being coy with this weird diagnosis and now he's had to leave the bubble after not getting a clear diagnosis. That is absolutely worrying to me. Now, in terms of how this series goes, the Lakers up 3-1. Without Lillard, it's done. The Lakers will be pushing through and they'll be getting into that second round. Now, in the second round, they're going to take on the winner of the Houston-Oklahoma City series, which is tied 2 games apiece. The Rockets won the first 2. The Thunder won the second 2. I originally picked the Thunder, and it looked pretty stupid. I think I had them in 6. But they've fought back, and they've started to figure some things out about beating Houston. They are playing a different way themselves. A lot of 3-guard lineups, which I talked about how this is one of the best matchups for that 3-guard lineup. Schroeder, Gilgeous-Alexander, and Chris Paul. And it's working at the moment. We're getting a little bit of extra Darius Bazley. We're getting more Danilo Gallinari, who's having some problems defensively, of course. But the Thunder team, with Lou Dort back, providing some level of resistance to James Harden. And it helps, of course, that Russell Westbrook is out. But it has been an interesting series, and at 2 games apiece, I'm going to have to, I guess, stick with my original projection that the Thunder win that one, and then they might take on the Lakers. And I think the Lakers will get that one, but I reckon it might go 6 games if that is the way it ends up going. If the Rockets win this series, I think that's a real problem for the Lakers. And I think if Houston does win this series, I think they have got a massive chance of at least pushing the Lakers to 7, if not beating them outright. So this is an absolutely huge series for the rest of the playoffs. The Clippers and the Mavericks, that series, the Clippers have a 3-2 lead at this point after blowing out the Mavericks in Game 5. Doncic and Porzingis are both listed on the injury report, so that's obviously not great news. Porzingis has missed the last 2 games. They're also joined by Finney Smith and Trey Burke, all as questionable. Doncic is questionable with that ankle problem after Marcus Morris stepped on his ankle, which looked a little bit of a dirty play. And if we're going to give benefit of the doubts, we don't give them to Marcus Morris, unfortunately. So that's not a great, wasn't a great look, and it's not a great scenario for the Mavericks. But they're down 3-2. The Clippers, absolutely fantastic defensively and offensively as they just piled on the points. They still don't have Montrezl Harrell rolling. Ivica Zubac, I think, still is the superior center on this team. They still don't have Patrick Beverley. Reggie Jackson has his struggles. Landry Shamet playing at point guard is probably working a little bit better. Paul George finally got going for the Clippers. You would think that the Clippers can close this one out, but Dallas has given them a bit of a shake. I think I had Clippers in 6 before this series started, so yeah, they're probably going to get that win in 6 overall. And then the last series in the West is Denver and Utah. The winner of that would take on the winner of the Clippers and the Mavericks. And I thought I thought the Nuggets were toast. But Jamal Murray has been massive. They are now 3-2 down in this series after Murray put up another massive performance. Michael Porter has moved to the bench but played better in Game 5. And they just performed at a much higher level than they had. And there was such a lack of urgency from Denver in so many of those earlier games that to see that actually transpire in this game, to get that level of urgency was huge. So that was good from them. The Jazz, I still think, are going to be favorites to get this one over the line, but at least we've got a little bit more interest thrown into it. If you're interested in losing some weight and doing it in a tasty way, Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar that you can find. Built Bar is back with their original 12 flavors, but also 6 new amazing flavors. Caramel brownie, cookies and cream, love cookies and cream, cherry barcia, lemon almond cheesecake, carrot cake, and another almond, apple almond crisp. These are high protein, low calorie, low sugar bars covered in 100% chocolate. Great to help lose or maintain weight as a delicious treat that tastes like a candy bar. Peanut butter bar, 19 grams of protein, but only 180 calories and only 5 grams of sugar. And while stocks last, you get a free cooler with your purchase. That's probably already run out by now, to be honest, but it is still available as an offer there to go and try to get your order in from Built Bar. So go to BuiltBar.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get $10 off your next order if you use that promo code LOCKEDON to save $10 off at BuiltBar.com. All right, so that's where we sort of stand in the NBA in terms of where these playoff situations are, where these series currently are. If you are watching this live over on Periscope, go and chuck in a question, and we'll whatever it is, and we'll see where we're at with what's his name with to answering your questions. I'll just tweet this out. But yeah, so let's have a look at, I guess, some of the individual performances through the playoffs. And I think that's important to know, because if we look at fantasy value on a per game basis through the playoffs, the number one player is Donovan Mitchell. He's averaging almost 38 points. And one of the things I've talked about Mitchell in the past, that he can be a consistent top 20 guy, and he can probably top out as a top 10 player. But what he needs to do, and you know what I'm going to say, he needs to get to the free throw line more. Well, he's averaging 10 free throw attempts per game in these playoffs, and he's hitting them at 94%. So that's a start. Now, I don't expect him to ever be a number one player, nor to average 38 points a game, because he's shooting 51% from 3 with a true shooting of 72% and 55% overall from the field on 22 attempts as a usage of 38. 55% from the field, usage of 38, no way. Not going to continue. He's probably a 31, 32 usage he can top out at. Maybe he's a 47% field goal guy. All still pretty good numbers, but it's that free throw number. He needs to be, instead of 5 free throws, if he gets to 9 free throws, which I think he can do, plus handling the ball, getting to 6 assists, which is sort of where he is in the playoffs, that is that top 10 to top 15 player. So we're seeing how it can happen, and it's happening in front of us right now. Number 2 players, James Harden, no surprise. Number 3 is the fun guy.
I'm a fun guy.
But number 4, it's the headmaster. It's Eche Homo. It's the Blue Arrow. Jamal Murray, 31 points a game, 6.5 boards with 7 assists, 4.5 threes. Like Mitchell, he is shooting a ridiculous 56% from the field and 52% from 3, which will come down. His usage is under 30 because he's just hitting a ton of shots. But I'm more impressed by the up rate in assists and rebounds for Murray. He had a shit game early on in this series, but the last couple have been massive, 50 plus, and then another 30 or 40 in Game 5. But getting those assists and rebounds up, still no defensive numbers. Hasn't missed a free throw. Limited free throw attempts as well. Only 2.8 free throw attempts. So he's not getting to the rim. So I'm a little bit cautious about how this translates over. but he is shooting at, his 3-point rate has gone up, which is massive. Like his 3-point percentage is huge, but he's taking quite a few of them as well, which is important. But he's showing a step forward, especially in that rebound and assist area. He can be a good scoring player, and you think he's pretty comfortably their second option. I feel comfortably saying that over Michael Porter. I still have concerns and holdbacks on where Porter is in the future, is where he develops as a player. And we saw those bubble games where he's putting up all those big numbers when Murray was out, and then when Murray came back, they dropped off, and he has had some struggles since then. But Murray putting up some good numbers. I'm not sure this translates into him being a top 20 player, but it is really good to see. At number 5, it's Nick Vuchevich. At number 6, Mike Conley. Remember the shit he got all season for being bad? Because he was bad. Why is he so high? 58% shooting, including 93% from the line. 23 points per game, and only 23% usage. It's been a really strong performance from Conley here in the bubble, and that's great to see after he struggled so much with injury and getting used to the system. I wouldn't be buying into him as being a top 30 guy next season, but you might be able to get a bit of a steal from him. Freddie VanVleet's at number 7. His free agency is going to be absolutely massive. Even if he doesn't leave the Raptors, I still value him as a top 50, top 40 player probably next season. LeBron is at number 8, Giannis at number 9, Embiid's at 10, Tatum 11, Kemba Walker at 12, averaging 24 points per game. So most of those guys, no surprise. If I just look through the rest of the top 24 for names that stand out to me, Tony Warren Jr. is there at 14, Serge Ibaka at number 16 in only 24 minutes. He's shooting 63% and averaging 19 and 10 with a block. That is obviously a really interesting number from Serge there as well. And I'll tell you what else is really interesting. If you're looking to fix your car, why would you go to a local auto store? RockAuto.com is the place that you need to be going to get all the parts that you need for your car. Do I go to a shop and have the guy sit on a computer, clickety, I'll order that in, it'll be 3 to 4 weeks. Mate, I could have done that myself at home, and you can just do that at home with RockAuto.com. A huge variety of parts for all the different makes and models of cars and trucks that you need. But RockAuto.com, they also have reliably low prices, and the price is the same for professionals and for do-it-yourselfers. Why would you spend up to twice as much for the same parts? Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, and in their How Did You Hear About Us box, write Locked On, so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. All right, let's have a look at the rest here of this top list of it. Doncic at 17. I see a lot of people at the moment talking about Luca Doncic. He's going to be a top 3 fantasy pick next season. And I still have Harden and Davis over him at this stage. And I don't know how the rest... Who the hell knows where Kevin Durant, where Steph Curry are going to fit into that mix. That's going to be a wild sort of mix to see how all that top 5 shakes out next year. But for all Doncic's heroics, he's still shooting on his 68% from the free throw line here. 49 from the field is good. 34 from 3 is pretty good. He's averaging 30, 10, and 9 with 1.2 steals. I'm not 100% sold on him being a top 3 fantasy guy next year. I love him, but the percentage issues... Now, if you're punting free throws, then he probably is that guy. But for all he's done in the playoffs, he's still only 17th in these playoffs. And I still have some of that concern as to where he sits at the end of the at the beginning of next season in terms of fantasy. I reckon there's a bit of a risk he gets maybe overdrafted by 3 or 4 spots, but realistically, we know how good he is. But he and Damien Lillard, I think, have got massive risks of being overdrafted. I could see Lillard going top 5. I could see Doncic going top 3. And I reckon that might be 4 or 5 spots too high for each of those guys. But we'll see. Big Chungus Nikola Jokic is at 18. Anthony Davis at 19. Gordon Hayward only played the 1 game. He was at 20th. Gilgeous-Alexander at 21. I think he's going to actually rise even further next year in the rankings. Porzingis at 22. Brogdon's at 23. He played 40 minutes a night, averaged 21 points with 10 assists. The rise in his assist numbers has been astonishing, while his teammate Miles Turner, 16 points, 11 rebounds. Imagine that from Miles Turner with 4 blocks. Amazingly shot just 44% from the line. He could have been way higher. I really don't know what the hell to do with him next season. We'll see exactly. There could be moves going with his Pacers team. I don't know what they're going to do with him and Sabonis, but clearly playing without Sabonis has worked wonders for Miles Turner. So that is your top 24. And also, just before Damien Lillard, oh man, he's so good. He was the 25th ranked player in those 4 playoff games that he played. So not that good. So I think those guys are worth mentioning. That's a top 24 for the fantasy ranks. For the rest of, or so far for the playoffs, I reckon that might wrap me up here today. I'll be back next week. People ask. I actually got a couple of questions. They didn't chuck them in the Periscope, but I'll throw them here. Does Miami have an actual shot against the Bucks? From Nick Barth? Yeah, I think they do, Nick. As I said before, I think there is a real chance that they can push this series out. And then EC says, what % probability is Westbrook playing Game 5? I reckon he's probably looking at 60 to 70% at this point. With these extra days off, I reckon Russ is going to be back. Now, the problem with Russell Westbrook can be is that undoubtedly he's a good player. But does he Westbrook the team? And if he's off, and he's done this in the playoffs so many times, it's going to be harder to do that with Harden around. But in the playoffs, he's done this where if he's off, he just dominates everything and get teams out of games. So while it could be a positive, it could also be a negative, depending on how D'Antoni and Harden and Westbrook himself handle it. So that is a concern. But I think he's a pretty good chance to play here in Game 5. That'll wrap me up now. Subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on YouTube. Give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. The NBA is back. This doesn't stop the players and their push for social justice and reform and all that sort of stuff, which I 100% support their strike. I 100% support them returning to action. Fantastic news for everybody that loves watching basketball, but also, I do, and I know a lot of the people, especially on the videos, for some reason just commenting because they hate the NBA. Cool, why are you watching this video? I support them 100% in their endeavors and their movements to try and use their fame and influence and the influence of their owners to try and, or the team's owners, and to try and put some pressure on governments, because there is some shit-ass things going on over in the United States. Guys, I am done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.